Hello, everyone. We still have a few spots left in Kinetics Summer School here in Longmont, Colorado. It's happening from July 30th through August 8th. Kinetics is my method of mapping the whole human organism through partner fascia release. We'll be gathering for 10 days to learn kinetics and explore our capacity for healing and regeneration together. We'll also be taking a one-day adventure break to Rocky Mountain National Park, and I'm really looking forward to that. So for more information, you can go to kinetics.academy and click on Summer School or click the link in the description below. With that, please enjoy this episode.
And what I've learned is that we all have a very rigorous curriculum. We all have, once we accept reincarnation, which is a big one to wrap your head around, the idea that we've been around in one form or another for eternity, for infinity, we've all accumulated very serious kinds of challenges. Nobody has it easy here. This is school. This is not a lounge. And I believe we need to take that seriously and really put aside what is egoically comfortable and submit to the curriculum that our soul signed us up to address.
All right. Well, Eric, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's very great to see you. We were just chatting before officially, starting the podcast about the fact that I did a series of sessions with you, one just for me, one with Stepan, and one joint about a year ago. So you are an astrologer, an astrology consultant, and I have benefited so much from your gifts. And over the years, it's been a long time. So I wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about astrology and the particular lens that you bring to astrology, which I really appreciate. You call it evolutionary astrology. So maybe we can just dive into the deep end there and start there. And from what I understand, it takes into consideration reincarnation and karma, which I'd really love to get I've never asked you this before, but I'd love to get your particular take on what that means, or what does it mean through the lens of astrology. So maybe we can start there. Like, what is evolutionary astrology? How did you get into it?
Great place to start. The way that I begin each of my consults these days, I do a little opening spiel, as I call it. And the first thing I say to people is, there's lots of different types of astrology out there. And what I do does tend to be a little bit different. And most astrology, from my understanding, does not come from the position of reincarnation. The chart is more or less looked at as a document. Here's what the energetic attunement is. This branch of astrology called evolutionary astrology is just simply the assumption that we're works in progress, that we're picking up on what is incomplete or unresolved. And in fact, this solar eclipse we're about to have, my interpretation of that is about regeneration, is that we're all in a cycle of death and rebirth, that energy is never created or destroyed, it just transforms. Now, within that broader understanding, there's not just one type of evolutionary astrology. In fact, there is that term is widely used for a particular teacher and school who likes to call themselves evolutionary astrology, Jeffrey Wolf Green. But that's only one perspective and approach. My view is that there's potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of evolutionary astrology based on our unique orientation. Mine differs because I have more of a transpersonal approach, which is different.
So what does that mean, transpersonal?
Yeah. Which means that we're looking at things from a less egoic perspective. We are looking at things in terms of what is our spiritual curriculum, whether our ego likes it or not. Whereas a lot of astrology is more egoically focused. This is good, this is bad. how do we jockey to have positive experiences, which is what a lot of astrology and a lot of life tends to orbit around. So I have a transpersonal approach, which is it's not about comfort or pleasure or things that are egoically gratifying. It's about eating the vegetables and learning our lessons and dealing with difficulty rather than how do we have a positive, good old time.
Yeah, I think, Eric, this is why I resonate with you so much, because with my work, I work with bodies and mostly people in pain. But what I've learned working with bodies and working with people in pain is that it's not just about the person. There's so many other factors that come into the body and impact us, like our relationships, or if we're in survival mode with money. And anyway, I could go on and on, but I'm fascinated by ecologies. And to me, we are simply a part of an ecology that is actually part of this cosmos that we don't often think about. But the sun affects everything. The moon seems to affect things. We have some awareness, but these mysterious objects out there in the cosmos affect us. So anyway, I just really appreciate your approach, and that, we're here to grow. And if we look at what life is showing us as reality, it's not all rainbows and unicorns.
No, it's not. And what I've learned is that we all have a very rigorous curriculum. We all have, once we accept reincarnation, which is a big one to wrap your head around, the idea that we've been around in one form or another for eternity, for infinity. We've all accumulated very serious kinds of challenges. Nobody has it easy here. This is school. This is not a lounge. And I believe we need to take that seriously and really put aside what is egoically comfortable and submit to the curriculum that our soul signed us up to address. And so the sun you mentioned is our life energy. And in my view, it is about awakening or enlightenment. It's about the maturation into our soul self, into our energy body, into essence or presence of spirit itself, soul realization. But conventionally, and even with various forms of evolutionary astrology, as I was taught from my teacher, the sun is seen as ego. And it's about me, me, me. And this is the type of astrology that I'm dedicating my life to help shift to the age of Aquarius. And Aquarius is more the transpersonal. It's about less about the ego. So just because we might understand evolution and spirituality doesn't necessarily mean all types of evolutionary astrology are about something more transpersonal. So there is that discernment that I like to make. To me, the sun is about awakening from ego, not about the ego itself. That is the paradigm shift that I believe we are collectively moving towards. But life tends to promote a very egoically oriented view of the sun. Think of the birthday. That's the solar return. Birthday is when it's about me, 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 give me gifts. I want a cake with candles, and it's all about me. And one of my teachers, Ajay Shanti, says we are collectively resolving a case of mistaking identity, thinking it's all about me, but actually the sun is about the dissolution of that attachment and identity, and to understand that we are energy, we are light, we are heat, we are presence, and we are borrowing the bodysuit for this presence for 80 to 100 years, but it's not about me. And so I've taken to not really celebrate my birthday as a emblematic kind of illustration that I'm just borrowing this identity and this attachment structure and this sense of self, that it's on loan to me, and I can honor it by not being so self-absorbed.
Okay, so if we dug into transpersonal here for a moment, I'm assuming it means something like not only what you're saying, like it's not just about me, me. But it's also, I would say, or just from observation, from living my life, but it's also not about just dissolving that. It's about the relationships, really. Relationships. Like I like saying everything is relationship and relationship is everything, because it's my relationship maybe to my body and my relationship to other people, my relationship to my life curriculum and my relationship to fill in the blank.
Yeah, it's a partnership. And what I mean by dissolution is the identity and attachments from the earlier stages of development. And those unresolved needs, we have karma connected to that unresolved need. And this is what is maturing and developing. And then ideally, we can be a conduit for our soul, for energy, and have a partnership that we're bridging oneness with separation. It is the paradox that, yes, I am a separate self, but I'm a conduit for my soul or for broader collective or spiritual reasons that I might contribute to, rather than my own agenda and having race cars and lots of money and whatever else. So we're learning to get ourselves out of the way for the soul, meaning our less mature desires and attachments and identities from earlier stages of evolution.
Yeah, beautiful. How I would word that in my philosophy, framework, conceptualization, whatever, would be kind of sacrificing the lower to the higher. Because the lower is here, it's tempting me all the time, to make it about me. But if I say yes to this curriculum that life or my soul has presented me, then I can evolve that part of me into something more that contributes to the whole.
Yes. And so I think one of the frustrations I've had over the years and the misperception is when people talk about awakening, they sometimes assume that we're doing the spiritual bypass from the personality, from the separate self. No, there's no bypass. It's just releasing the earlier preoccupations, releasing attachments, releasing the agendas that get in the way of being a conduit who can bridge worlds. And that's what is represented on the charts. What the nodal axis points to, the nodes of the moon, is the spiritual curriculum that was stemming from our more egoic, less mature self. So we need to do that. We need to resolve those things, then awaken into the ability to be this conduit, and then we bridge worlds. That we do have a personality, we do have the separate self, but we're using it in service to our soul rather than just ourselves.
Okay, so when you're looking at a chart, when you're consulting, with astrology, looking at someone's life through the lens of astrology, you're looking at not just what their chart means about them, that the personal, what we've been talking about, personality, soul, but also what their curriculum is what their curriculum is maybe in regards to relationships and money and career purpose and health, all kinds of things, right?
Yeah. And so the way that I talk about it with people is the sun is the process of awakening, like the acorn grows into a tree. And then as we mature into our spiritual promise, the tree, the realization of the sun in our charts, then there's ripened fruits that develop, that ripen on our branches, so to speak. And that is the gift we give the world of our own development, is we teach what we're learning. We have contributions in the same areas that we've been struggling with, and it all becomes more ripe, more mature, and more realized as an offering. And that's how we all support our collective evolution as an extension of our own personal development. And our fruits ripen, and they're nourishing to others. And hopefully we create a spiritual village when everyone offers their ripened fruits. But we need to ripen our fruits.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah. I talk a lot about seed. There's always a seed in pain, anything painful. But actually, if we were to germinate it and grow it, then it could sprout into something alive, and then it could eventually fruit into something, and then, becomes an offering. So perfect. I love that. All right. Well, I'd love to ask you just a little bit about you, and then we'll circle back and maybe go about some astrology stuff. But how did you
After I talk about it, it's not all about me. Let's talk about me.
Well, I'm always just curious, like, how did you end up doing this? And in particular, I guess what I'm really curious about, because I've never asked you this, is so I know you originally were going to school for psychology.
Yes.
And you got a degree, in psychology, bachelor's. But then somewhere along the line, you transitioned to an astrology-focused consulting career. But then also, like, what I'm really curious about is, how did you get into astrology, first of all? What made you want to go into that? And then secondly, where did the idea of reincarnation and karma and our life curriculum come into play for you?
Okay. So it was my mid-20s in the 90s, and I was going to a psychology graduate program in New Hampshire. And I got into spirituality in my mid-20s and metaphysics and all types of things. And I found an incompatibility with the more mainstream psych program. So I dropped out of that, and I went to Naropa in Boulder, Colorado, and decided to get my master's in transpersonal counseling psychology, and I did. And while I was in school at Naropa, it was a pretty progressive alternative curriculum, and there's people there into all types of things, including astrology. So I was exposed to that, and I ended up studying that while I was at Naropa, and I did my master's thesis on using astrology as a counseling tool. And then I graduated in 2001 and became an astrologer that year with my master's in counseling with astrology as my main tool. And then, just understanding spirituality and teachings and philosophy, the idea of reincarnation became part of my belief system. So I naturally gravitated to astrology that incorporated that philosophy rather than types that didn't. And I mentored with a evolutionary astrologer named Stephen Forrest back then for a few years, and his tutelage was from that perspective. And then I individuated, like I said, and developed my own approach. He was teaching that the sun is ego. That was the main point of individuation, where I look at the sun as awakening from ego, as I described earlier. And that was the point of my departure and individuation from that particular teacher. And then I became very interested in other teachers as well, not astrology, but spiritual teachers. Adyashanti, I mentioned, he was a major influence. Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Gangaji, and Shri Ramana Maharshi, and other Indian sages. And reincarnation is just part of that whole kind of mindset of awakening. And Naropa itself is a Buddhist-affiliated school. So that just became, natural to bring in Eastern thought, including reincarnation, into astrology, like many others.
Awesome. Is it? I haven't come across very many people that are using astrology in counseling, or, like with the psychology, because there's psychotherapists and there's counseling, people want help with trauma or relationship conflicts or, any number of things. It's not been very common that I've seen people using astrology in a counseling capacity. Is that just because I haven't been looking, or is that more common, do you think, than?
I think if you're going to be an astrologer consulting with people, that is a counseling. And I do think that having counseling credentials or experience or some kind of certificate or something might be helpful. But this is the shift, is that conventionally astrology is more, let me read your fate. And in fact, many people call it a reading. And I disagree with that. I don't use the term reading, and I don't believe the astrology conveys anyone's fate. I believe it conveys your curriculum that you are addressing rather than here's what's going to happen. So the paradigm shift is less predictive and fortune telling, and here's what the universe has in store, and let me read it for you. And I don't need any counseling skills because I'm just, interpreting your, fate. But once we understand that things aren't fated and predetermined, but a curriculum, then we consult with people. So I call it a consultation rather than a reading, because I'm consulting with them about how to manage your own curriculum rather than telling you, here's who you are, what's going to happen, like you don't have any choice. So that is, part of the difference, is that astrology historically has been much more along the lines of predetermined, here's what the universe has in store for you, rather than how do you co-create your life based on your own free will.
Yep. Another reason I just really resonate. So for people listening, I want them to maybe know, and just to remind you, I did the first reading with you in 2011. It was very, very, very...
Wow, was it that long ago?
Yeah, I know. And I needed that level of consulting at the time, exactly how you're describing it. Like, I wasn't just looking for like a reading. I wanted to know, like, why is this my curriculum? And then, given, this whole podcast is talking about constraints, right? We do have constraints, but it doesn't mean we're not free. It means we have a curriculum. Like, that's literally, I use that same word because I have the same belief. We each have a curriculum, and it's going to look differently in these areas of, these 5 areas that I talk about on the podcast, depending on many factors, right? But one way to perhaps assess your curriculum is astrology. And it's been so powerful for me when I get someone good, and you are excellent at what you do, in my opinion. I'm very picky. So, and then I've sent many people to you, and I've done additional readings that have been really helpful. So, let's imagine for a moment that people listening haven't really heard of this type of astrology or astrology consulting, and how it could help them navigate their life curriculum with a little more awareness and agility, because they kind of understand the terrain. That's how I would word it. Like, oh, okay, this is the terrain. This is my curriculum, and I have option. I have some freedom in how I respond to my curriculum.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So how would you describe to people the way the stars, the planets affect us? And yeah, let's go on a little journey of like, what's happening up there, and how does it affect us, and why is it useful to make this conscious?
Well, even the word that you use there, affect us, is part of my view. What needs to shift is, now we're going to get transpersonal, is conventionally and in conventional astrology, things outside the parameter of our skin are looked at as separate than us. And then the things that are outside of us can affect us, to use your language. But the Aquarian perspective, the paradigm shift, quantum physics reveals this, is that things outside of us are not separate from us. We have an entangled, co-creative relationship with everything. So it's a two-way street. So it's not so much of the planets or astrology affecting you. It is your own psyche that you're co-creating with. The planets are the paints on your palette. The paint doesn't affect you and make you paint a certain way. You partner with the paint and you design your life. So even that language, I think, is the old paradigm. So I encourage the idea of co-creation.
Yep.
Is that we're in partnership. So nothing is affecting us. It is us. Just like, how do you partner with your body to move? How do you partner with your psyche and astrology to design from your imagination?
And beautiful. So this is exactly what I was getting at, which is it's relational in nature, and how you relate determines what happens, determines your experience, determines, yeah.
Yes. So we do have the ability to paint with all of these colors on our palette, and there is freedom. And then the major criticism of others, more conventional, is saying, wait a second, we do have things we have to comply with reality. We have to, it's not all like, free. You can't design, pink hippos to fly around on. That's not reality. We are bound. And that is true. And Saturn, believe it or not, is about our limitations and our responsibilities and our karma. And it is the main focus of my work. Even as a transpersonal astrologer, the outer planets go with that. But again, we can't bypass reality. So I actually spend more time with Saturn, with clients and with writing, because in order to embrace the creativity and limitless of the outer planets, the transpersonal, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, you have to mature into the full-grown tree. And Saturn's about maturation. We have to comply with our necessary work. No bypass. And therefore, a lot of the limitless or the expansiveness only becomes available when we mature into it. So Saturn is the principal energy of what has been our karmic Achilles heel, what has limited us, what has gotten the better of us.
Repeat that. What did you say? It's our what?
I mentioned the karmic Achilles heel.
Oh, Achilles heel. Okay, got it.
It's what has hobbled us. It is what has prevented us from being fully empowered. And we need to resolve and heal and develop our Saturn in order to have access to what's beyond. So I spend more time with that realism, and also the moon. We have to emotionally develop. We have to deal with our attachments and our spiritual immaturity. To me, that's encapsulated by the moon. And I don't use that negatively. Everything is in a process of evolution. We all begin as children, as toddlers in our spiritual childhood. It's not negative. It's just the way it is. So we have to do that in order to then realize the broader promise. So first things first. So I spent a lot of time, and I just did a consult a few minutes ago before you and I spent a lot of time with people. Okay, we have to be attending to our spiritual lessons, our karma that was generated from earlier stages of development. So we can't bypass that. So as a counselor, as someone with a psychology background, as a Cancer sun is who I am, I spend a lot of time on dealing with emotional realities as the gateway to spiritual development.
So what I'm hearing you say is that rather than using this language, affect us, we're being invited by reality, by the phenomena of reality, to partner with the phenomena, in various forms, to co-create the next evolution of ourselves, maybe, but also of the human family, of this planet, of the universe. And there are, I would imagine, consequences to, say, someone saying, no thanks, I'm just going to opt out. Like, because what came to mind as you were talking was like, if I were to imagine being in a relationship and I'm being invited to grow myself, to mature so that I can have a good relationship and maybe stop being so triggered by certain things. If I'm just like, well, no thanks, like, you do the work. I don't know how good that relationship is going to be.
Well, I mean, whatever frequency of maturation we are at is how life is going to be experienced. And there's a spectrum from dark to bright, from unconscious to enlightened. And all of astrology will play out depending on where we are on the spectrum. And you can conceptualize that. Think of the spectrum of maturation from baby to adult. Is that a 3-year-old is going to navigate differently than a 33-year-old usually. And so whatever we bring to astrology is going to then manifest around us. So if we're not attending to our curriculum, if we have resistance, if we want to opt out, to use your language, and we're not really embodying our soul intentions or essence, then things are going to then manifest at that frequency. Now, I don't bring a judgment and say that's bad or wrong. I think it's totally fine to be at any developmental level.
Yep. And yeah, exactly. Like, and there's freedom in choosing too, if you choose consciously. Yeah, just not.
But there is an issue when people blame external things. Oh, I have a Saturn transit. That's because. No, that is you. That is your soul that is delivering your own karmic consequences. We can't blame it on anything outside of us. And oftentimes in relationship, people point the finger and they blame others. And that, to me, is the evasion of responsibility. And ultimately, the transpersonal view is that we're only interacting with ourselves through others and the external world as a reflection of our own psyche. And ultimately, we need to take responsibility rather than point fingers. And I view triggers as helpful to point us to the necessary work. They're not to be avoided or seen as a pain in the ass. That's immature. I think spiritual awakening and maturity is to say, okay, what can I learn through this activation? And it's helpful. Be triggered. That's why we're here, is to work through things rather than avoid it.
Yeah, so one of the things I personally found so helpful about astrology, especially the way that you consult with people, or at least with me, I can't speak to other people, is it lifts a little bit of the burden of confusion or not knowing why this certain pattern keeps maybe showing up in my life. And it's like, oh, okay, that's my curriculum. And it's this, this sort of entanglement or whatever. And yeah, it's mine to take responsibility for. But there's something both freeing and empowering in that, at least for me. But I'm curious if do you ever, I hadn't really thought about people like blaming, oh, well, I have these astrology aspects and that's why I'm so.
It's pretty common.
Interesting.
Even right now, Mercury's retrograde, blame it on that.
And wait for it to be over, right?
Yeah. That's, again, orbiting around personality, comfort, and what is easier, rather than dealing with reality with what is.
Okay, so continuing on, you were talking about Saturn and, focusing a lot on that. So where do we meander next, or do you have more to say about Saturn? I interrupted you, but.
We can go anywhere you want. Saturn maturation, the key to our spiritual adulthood, the key to what exists beyond. And anything that is more metaphysical or transpersonal becomes more and more available, but it's just a nice idea unless we actually mature into it. So collectively, where we are now, in my view, as we move towards the age of Aquarius, which is about the transpersonal, which is about the freedom to explore beyond the limitations of the egoic level. This is what's going on now collectively, is that we're resolving our entrenchment in patriarchy, in institutions, in traditions, into external authorities being the directors of everything and their agenda, which is often fueled by their own interests for status or even money or institutional protocol. The movement towards Aquarius is about we're all in charge of our destiny, that we're all in relationship with the divine, and the viewpoint that this is a theater of our own soul work. And we get to be the directors of the theater rather than the patriarchy or institutions or traditions or parents or anyone else external to us. This is what the collective evolution is right now, is to be fully having jurisdiction over our own destiny rather than social conformity to traditions and institutions. So right now, what's happening on the world stage is our traditions and institutions are all seeming to crack. We don't have confidence in our leaders. We don't have confidence in the Supreme Court. We don't have confidence in many people in conventional religion anymore, or outdated patriarchal philosophies. All of this stuff is crumbling like a house of cards around us. And in order for us to then pick up the pieces and take responsibility for our own destiny, and then to repopulate the manifest world of education systems and institutions from a more liberated, more Aquarian, more modern consciousness, rather than just adhering to traditions in the way it's always been. So it's a time of uncertainty with this process, a time where people feel, I don't know what to believe in or what to trust, and everything is falling or crumbling around me. And this is what it means to be in a paradigm shift or between the ages as we are. So this process will probably take a long time. It's not going to unfold overnight. I think we're looking at decades, if not the next couple centuries. So it's going to happen beyond our existence. But if you think of the astrological age of Aquarius lasting for 2,000 years, that's the bigger perspective. We are now maturing from the age of Pisces, which basically is the last 2,000 years, correlating with the modern calendar and with the figure of Christ. That was roughly 2,000 years ago. And here we are in 2024, and we're transitioning into the age of Aquarius gradually.
Okay, can we go on a little journey through the age of Pisces? That's what you said, right? Yeah?
Yeah.
Into then this age of Aquarius, and talk about it both astrologically, but also like from an evolutionary perspective. Because, so I imagine some of my audience is going to be super familiar with astrology and some people might not be. And I also have been aware the last, 10 years maybe or so, people are saying the age of Aquarius, but they have I can tell they don't know what it means. It's a really nice thing to say.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how things like that just kind of move through the zeitgeist, that actually are reflecting some reality. It's just that we're unconscious as to the nature of the reality.
So let's talk about that then. So the important point to make is that there's nothing in astrology that's better or worse than anything else, in my view. Aquarius isn't better than Pisces. It's just a different age. And so for the last 2,000 years, roughly, I think these ages are more like 2,100 years rather than 2,000. So it's not perfect with our construction of numbers. We would like it to be more 2,000, but it's more like 2,165 or something like that. At any rate, Pisces. So the gift and the challenge. The challenge, let's talk about first, is when we give our power away. That's the savior is outside of us. And Pisces is the symbology of the fish. And Christianity uses the symbology of the fish that many people put on the back of their cars. And that's emblematic of Pisces. And the whole ideation, and my understanding, I'm not Christian myself, I'm Jewish, but even Judeo-Christian or even Islam can go in this, or other religions too, is that there's something outside of us, is the distortion here. I need a savior that's external to me. Not realizing that it is a reflection of you, that we need to, mature ourselves. I don't like the word save, but mature, awaken, come into our promise from the earlier stages of suffering that tend to be created in earlier on in the curriculum. So Pisces can go with things that are disillusioning and suffering and things where we feel victim or martyr. And martyr for a cause, martyr for a doctrine, martyr for a certain philosophy or what have you. This is what's been going on. And a sense of escapism can go with Pisces. The epidemic of drug use, of alcoholism, of even prescription drugs, or, many other things, fentanyl or whatever, all these things out there, is, not taking full empowerment for our destiny is the Pisces hour. Now, what has also been developing is the gift of Pisces these last 2,000 years, and that is spirituality itself. That is intuition, consciousness, meditation, anything contemplative, dreams, the ability to develop intuitively. Things like hypnosis or past life regressions or altered states of consciousness that can be visionary. That has also proliferated these last couple thousand years.
And how is that all encapsulated in Pisces?
These are all Pisces things. Pisces is about consciousness and spirituality. So what I'm saying is that there can be a disempowered version of that, which I talked about first, and now the conscious look of it is what's available, and there has been intuitive or contemplative development that's been pretty profound as well. So as we shift to Aquarius, the motion is, okay, Aquarius is more cultural. It is more about sociology. It is more about interdependence. It is about technology. It is about developing the mind and conceptual things. AI, computers, electronics. This is all Aquarian. This is all proliferated dramatically in our lifetimes. If you look at the 20th century, when it opened, there were no cars, there were no planes, there was no computers. And at the end of the 20th century, radically different, just in 100 years. The 21st century already, 24 years in, it's even accelerated exponentially since the 20th century. And now we're all walking around with bees, Okay,
so would you say that the age of Pisces was more about the individual or no?
No, it's not about the individual. That's Aries and Taurus and the earlier signs. Pisces is grappling with this idea of consciousness and spirituality. What does that mean?
Consciousness.
And do we locate it external to us versus internal to us, which is the point I was making.
Okay.
And my view is that we're healing the externalization, that a savior or a religion or something outside of me is going to save me or something like that. Whereas ultimately it's between you and spirit and it's found within. That to me is the work of the age of Pisces.
And when did the age of Aquarius start?
Well, again, that's what we've been talking about. It's a gradual transition over decades, if not a century.
Okay.
We're in transition for decades.
Okay. And what we're talking about right now is, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to put words to something and you'll tell me what you think. But so what we're talking about right now though is how the planets and these astrological relationships are affecting either this planet, would you say, or like humanity as a whole. So there's if we look at human beings as a whole instead of individuals, and these planets are affecting our progression through time. But then there's also, my current incarnation as Elisha and my relationship to those planets that's unique to me. Yeah.
Many layers going on. Yeah.
And both are happening at once. Yeah.
Of course. And many other dimensions too. And lots of things. And, so the timing, this whole thing, once it started, my view is in the 1960s, which is now, 50 to 60 years ago, we had a major alignment, Uranus conjunct Pluto, and that was a seed time. And there was a lot of proliferation of new beginnings, more consciousness, more humanistic, more spiritual in the 60s. Look at that as one kind of marker. Like if you're driving down the highway, that's a mile marker. And then now we're at another mile marker. Pluto just went into Aquarius. And then we have Uranus moving to Gemini, another marker about a new type of consciousness or a new evolutionary kind of metaphysical opportunity. Also, the planet Neptune moves to Aries next year. New beginning. Aries is the first sign. Neptune, spirituality. So there's these different markers on the road that are all consistent with a more Aquarian or Uranian type, or even more broadly, transpersonal activation. And so over a period of decades, or maybe a century, in my view, there is these progressive kind of amplifications or markers, but none of them are the one that enters the age of Aquarius.
Right. It makes me think of like, there isn't one moment where like, I'm an adult now.
No, that's the same idea, precisely. People want to locate something to a moment. It just doesn't work that way. It's more gradual than that. And so if you think of these ages lasting 2,000 years, doesn't it make sense that from one age to the next will probably last 100 or 200 years for the transition? That's what we're in. And so we see the transition in the 20th century and the 21st with technology and electronics and AI recently, and metaphysics and evolutionary astrology. These are all Uranian Aquarian things that are gradually developing over these decades. That's where we're at. While simultaneously, the more Capricorn, Saturnian, patriarchal stuff is gradually disassembling in front of our eyes over a period of decades.
Okay, so how would you characterize the challenge and opportunity in the age of Aquarius that we're in? It maybe would word it differently than that.
Well, the challenge is we need to operate as an interdependent system rather than our own self-interest. This is the whole point. This is the shift from the sun as ego to sun awakening from ego, that we're all in this together. It's not about me and my own self-interest. And so we're seeing those who have exaggerated self-interest, the ultra wealthy, the ultra influential, and not wanting to share their slice of the pie. It's really become cartoon-like that, you have basically maybe, about 100 people have more collective wealth and status than half of the world population. That's the issue. That's the problem, is that we need to be interdependent. That's Aquarius. We need to function as one organism. And if we don't, then the ship is probably going to go down by the selfishness and the hedonism of the personality egoic, level, emblematically represented by, that imbalance. And so this whole focus on me, rugged individualism, and I want to be as wealthy and as powerful for my own self-interest as possible is going to sink the ship for all of us if we don't correct that imbalance. That's the necessary issue to move into the age of Aquarius, is we have to be interdependent. We have to realize that when I support you, I get supported in return, rather than competitive, rather than looking at others as a threat, and we need to control them. And so we're dealing with these issues of controlling others, racism, sexism, xenophobia, because they're a threat to my own self-interest, rather than saying, no, they have something that I can partner with, and we're all in this together. So Aquarius, is the understanding is we're all in this together.
Yeah, and I imagine because of the transition period, because it's not just like a moment, oh, now we're doing this other thing, that we're also individually and collectively taking into the age of the shadow side of the Pisces, which is wanting savior, feeling like a victim, wanting to blame, wanting other people to take responsibility instead of each of us doing our part for the whole. And now we're, and then I imagine, I start thinking about how those energies could affect, there I am using that word again, the potential consequences, I guess, of bringing that energy into this age of AI and technology, and these systems that are still in place, the economic systems we currently have, and the people in power that are controlling the economic systems and the AI and technology systems. So that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah. And so we have to also be aware of the shadow of Aquarius. And, one of the adjectives that come up when I think of the shadow of Aquarius is creepy. Think about somebody who's actually in a relationship with a robot, like intimately. That's creepy. And the psychological dehumanizing effect, because Aquarius can eliminate the human factor, the emotional factor, and it could be full and robotic and dispassionate and technological and neutral and leveling our humanity, where we are much more robotic, and AI and computers themselves have much more of an influence on everyday life. This is the shadow. This is the work that we're going to collectively need to be very aware of, is the dehumanization of things, because we are human, we are, sensitive, we are emotional, and we need to maintain connection with that for the age of Aquarius. So that is the major thing to look out for. And so a lot of our cautionary tales, like Brave New World, and other dystopian types of novels, paint a picture of what it could look like to have technology supersede our humanity. This is the collective issue of Aquarius that we're going to need to navigate. And
Eric, I can't help thinking about, because I pay attention to these things, they're sort of in my field. Like I've listened to podcasts with people who are in institutions, looking at how to use technology and AI to eliminate pain, for example. I'm like, oh my God, like we have no idea what, like we eliminate pain, we eliminate everything. Like, you can't, every feeling, right? We're trying to eradicate from the way I would say that in this conversation is, well, in many ways we've become robotic, but now we're wanting to eliminate these emotions that we don't like feeling, these feelings of physical pain that we don't like feeling. And if we could just electrocute our brains in a certain way or implant a chip and get rid of it, there are a lot of people, I think, that would line up to do that.
Yeah, so things of this nature need to be negotiated, and oftentimes it can be very nuanced and not clear, because there can be legitimacy in easing suffering through technology, but there's also the issue of bypass and not doing our work, and these are complicated, multifaceted issues, and that's what Aquarius is. And oftentimes Aquarius goes with paradox as well, and things that are complicated, so it's sometimes not so clear. It's not so easy to discern. There's nuance. And this is one of the things about Aquarius that I'm actually looking forward to more proliferation, is nuance, is paradox, is looking at things with more complexity, because I find that very often, and this social media is, I think, guilty of this, is reducing things to sound bites and to good or bad without that nuance. So Aquarius is about nuance. It is about seeing that there's many dimensions or levels going on with things.
Wow, cool. I also love how you're just like, that's just, you got this perspective, I think, from the astrology. You're like, that's just what's happening.
So, I mean, I love Aquarius. My North Node's in Aquarius. I'm here to be an Aquarian kind of advocate, but there is a very creepy and scary dark side to the archetype. But the dark side of any archetype in astrology is really, unconscious and immature and problematic across the board. Mm-hmm. So all of them are a curriculum. None of them are good or bad. Mm-hmm. They all have a range. Mm-hmm. So we need to be aware of the shadow of Aquarius, because the bright side of it is beautiful and important, and it's going to save our collective skin if we can function as a interdependent, organism. And Aquarius is kind of like agape, universal love for all, that we're all in this together. It's a beautiful sentiment at its brighter side.
I'd love to ask you how, maybe through consulting, or if you could give examples of how people listening or watching, how do we take our curriculum and then actively participate in the co-creation of this new fabric of reality, if you will, of collaboration instead of competition, because I imagine to some degree it's a razor's edge of making it about me, because I could even say cool, I'm gonna help the world, but then it's really about me. What are some examples of how we can take these challenging personal curriculums of ours, or collective, both, and actively co-create this new age of Aquarius?
Well, my view is that most people are instinctively doing their charts, whether they realize it or not. And a lot of astrology just affirms what they're already doing is largely the experience. And we have the gifts. We are in the operating system of our chart. And it's just doing it more consciously and being in on the game, is the way that I see it. And so astrology often affirms, but we have the attunement, we have the gifts, we have the attributes that we need to play our role. So astrology just supports that. It gives it more perspective. It gives it more timing. It gives it more nuance. But one of the most common things that I overhear from clients is, well, what you have done with me today really affirms what I already know.
That was true for me.
Yeah. When I love hearing that, I was like, good, I'm glad. But if you don't mind me using you for an example for a minute, I recall that you're a Leo sun, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So being a Leo is a sun, I should say. One of the criticisms I have is when people generalize, I'm a Leo or I'm a Cancer, like there's nothing else. So I always encourage people to attach sun, that you're a Leo sun. So that is to be on stage. It is to have visibility and recognition. But the issue is I am playing a character in a broader theater. It's not about me. So when someone plays Hamlet, they don't think that they're Hamlet. They think that they're playing the role of Hamlet. So being a Leo is to adapt some theatrical persona, play Hamlet or Ophelia, and enjoy the part and contribute the gifts of that character. But the more awakened version is to see that you're just wearing a costume. It's not about you, and you're not really Ophelia or Hamlet. You're just playing the role. To me, that is the awakened version. And so, yes, be theatrical, be a Leo, and have fun with it. It's a gift.
Yeah, I'm on the cusp, and I've never been exactly that kind of Leo, but I am drawn. Obviously, I'm on YouTube.
Well, that's the thing. Is the sun we need to, I hear this all the time. Yeah. The sun we need to grow into. And many people don't initially identify with it because it's a developmental process. This is one of the most common things I work with people. So I like to say, you're a Leo in training because it's your developmental curriculum. So oftentimes you may not be comfortable with it. It's not instinctual because you got to grow into it. I'm a Cancer sun in training, and I need to develop how to be more emotionally focused, deal with my feelings, and be a counselor and be more rooted and learn how to cook. None of these things are that natural for me. I have to mature into it. So that's the sense of the sun, is a developmental process of becoming. And then the ripened fruits of that maturation are the gifts. Through your podcast, through representing yourself visibly as a Leo, that's your ripened fruits.
Yeah. I mean, just for people listening too, to know, like, and for you to know, Eric, like you're consulting with me on these things again. Yes. And very affirming. And it's like, okay, this is, what I would actually say is, for me personally, I've had confirmation and affirmation working with you that the call I feel to do something publicly is the right, is okay. I'm on the right track. And my curriculum on this path is, when I get a negative comment on YouTube, for example, so like, okay, I'm a sensitive Leo, like, or whatever, Leo in training, Leo, whatever else is there. It's like, my work is to deal with all the stuff that comes up for me on that path, because it's not just, oh, I got this, no problem. There's insecurity sometimes, or self-consciousness, or people say certain things about me, and then I have to work with that.
Well, that's the curriculum of being more comfortable in visibility. And the spotlight is the Leo intention, but the emotional things go more with whatever's unresolved with the moon in anyone's chart. Is we all got a moon profile with different challenges or emotional issues, or the lack of resolution of things. And so we're all going to get our feelings triggered, and that's moon stuff. And so, as I mentioned, I'm very sensitive to that. Being a Cancer sun, I do focus a lot on the moon, which is the resolution of the spiritual childhood, goes with this archetype of the moon in Cancer. And not to bypass it or to look at it negatively, but to honor it and to mature it and to be more emotionally connected to the gift of the archetype, which is self-love and unconditional regard for our own maturation as the gateway for awakening.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's awesome. It's that's the real gift I think you have, is framing astrology in this way, where it's about just reality. Really, that's how I look at it. This is the reality of this cosmos that we're a part of. And then, here's your curriculum, which might be like, here are the challenges, which is so important to talk about, right?
There's always challenges. Nobody's here, to be in a lounge, as I like to say. This is a very rigorous school.
But then also, it's so confirming to know not only, okay, yep, those are my challenges, but also I'm being called to something, like, and it's all in us. I've never met anyone who's not called to something, whether they're acting on it or not, is another matter, but we're all called to something. And it's also affirming to go, oh, wow, that's in my astrology. And it's, when we did our first consult, you didn't know anything about me whatsoever. It's totally, and I think that's probably true most of the time with you, or a lot of the time. Yeah, it's just I'm so fascinated by it.
Well, it does. It opens the door to the understanding that, back to reincarnation, the only way to make sense of, in my view, of a natal chart is that we have this elaborately sophisticated psyche that stems from who knows where. And so for me, doing this type of astrology for 25 years now, really just affirms for me every day that, holy cow, we've been around for eternity in one form or another. the Dream Theater, the show that we're in, is not new. And there's probably been many, if not infinite, other evolutionary lines. So when we look at the calendar and it says 2024, might give the illusion that things are only 2,000 years, or this shift, from the common era of organizing the calendar. But even before that, there's not that much, only a few thousand years of recorded, people didn't keep calendars, thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago. But astrology says, okay, it's been endless. There's probably been infinite evolutionary lines that we've been part of. There's nothing new under the sun. It's only a new iteration of an evolutionary trajectory that is occurring on planet Earth. But everything is a lot broader than that. There's billions of stars just in our galaxy, and there's billions of galaxies, and this has been going on for eternity. And so your mind can get blown. This is Aquarius. And so when we have that big picture, holy cow, look at the enormity of it, then we can be less caught up. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the current present challenges is only a teeny little moment in infinite evolution. And the other thing that I find comfort in the broader perspective is I don't have an attachment that it's all going to work out and we're going to create some enlightened spiritual village. If someone throws a nuclear warhead tomorrow and it all collapses, well, that's probably happened infinite times. And we just regenerate in a new evolutionary line. We have all of eternity to work stuff out. It's not this huge catastrophe. Do I want us to flourish? Yes. Am I wanted to play my role? Of course. But do I have an attachment that it all becomes enlightened? No. And it hasn't been previously many times. So it's okay if it doesn't. But it's also wonderful if we can create it. And I'm certainly going to play my role, and I encourage clients to. But we need to kind of release the agenda or the attachment that it needs to.
I must say, as a client of yours, that non-attachment is so helpful, because I think if you were attached to me as your client, like fulfilling my curriculum, that would affect our relationship or my ability to really hear what you're saying. Yeah. I
don't have that agenda for people, and one of the ways I work with people is that here's the work. If we want to do it or not, it's up to you. It's your life, you do what you want to do. I don't have an agenda for people at all. It's like I've learned to accept that many people, if not most people, are not that interested in ardently working on their spiritual development. They're just not.
It's hard.
Many people are just like, you know what? I just want to make money, be comfortable, raise my kids, and go to a baseball game and then die happily. And I'm not judging that. That's fine. Yeah. It's not the most invested in these Aquarian, spiritual things. And I don't think people need to if they don't want to. Mm-hmm. And I certainly accept when people don't have that interest.
Okay. So look,
it's optional is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where there are constraints, but there's free will. And so yeah. Okay, I want to know, because I've never asked anybody this question, and I've always wondered, like, how is this knowledge studied? How is it tradition that's passed down, and that's why we still have it? Is it where do you learn about Saturn? Where does that come from?
Well, the thing that's so amazing is pretty much all cultures have some kind of cosmology of some form. In Australia, the Aboriginals looked at the stars. The Mayans had an astrology, Chinese astrology, Vedic astrology. There's many different systems. There's many different frameworks. There's even different zodiacs, the sidereal versus the tropical, which is a whole other discussion that we don't need to get into. So it's innate in us to feel connected to what's around us. The sun nourishes all living things. We have an energetic relationship with the sun. The moon controls the tides. We are connected to the energies around us. So it has always been natural to develop cosmologies or astrologies. That's there throughout history across the board. The details of that is, how do we understand, the archetype of Saturn? Well, a lot of it has been developed through understanding things scientifically. Saturn has the rings. It's about containment. Jupiter's big. It's about expansion. Mars is red. It's fire. It's about war. So we have some understanding of things through the physical characteristics, but I think most of it was intuitive. Most of it was our ancient predecessors were visionaries. They were intuitives. They had access to that. And a lot of it was just like our great innovators like Tesla or Carl Jung or many others or Einstein. They're connecting with things intuitively, and it just comes to them because we're all connected to this broader interconnected intelligence. We're all nerve endings of the bigger brain. So we're all going to be downloading it. And so what you see with these different cosmologies is people downloading and then looking at things and putting it together with physical characteristics. And it's evolved through collective effort over thousands of years. That's the best way I can conceptualize it.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating to me because I've had such profound experiences with it when I find amazing people like you that I just simply have faith in it. But I don't know. Like I don't have the relationship that you do. So it is for me kind of a faith-based relationship. Other than obviously I have a relationship with the sun and the moon because I can see them so obviously.
But I also think that these things are evolving as we evolve, and that's what my work is about. And I vary with my interpretation of what some of the planets actually mean. For instance, a lot of more conventional types might look at the sun and moon as your mother or your father or the masculine and the feminine. My view is that the sun and moon has to do more with our energy as the sun and our physicality, the moon. Awakening into our soul self is the sun, and the rootedness to the physiological attachment, structure of the separate self is the moon. And then Venus and Mars have more to do with the masculine and the feminine than the sun and moon, is my view. And but more conventionally, the sun and moon is looked at in that way or projected out to seeing as your mother and father. But I don't think life is so organized so neatly these days. Not everyone just has a mother and a father. Life is more complicated than that. And that's a projection screen for the sun and moon, and an antiquated one at that. So to me, astrology points to the individual, not others who are involved in our orbit. It's all about your own relationship with family, with the masculine and feminine, with your mother and father is inside of you. And then that becomes projected onto the movie screen, is my view. So the understanding of projection is a relatively new phenomenon on the world stage. People didn't use that word and understand things. And so a lot of the astrology we've inherited, things in the chart, is seen as other people rather than us. And I think that is the paradigm shift, is everything is us in the chart. Everything points to you and your relationship to these things. But it's not ultimately representing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I resonate with that a lot in terms of the sun, the moon, Mars, and Venus.
Well, the sun is how we project. That's our radiance. That's the way the life energy is radiated out in our energy body, is that we're all projecting our chart onto the external world, and everything then is reflected back. Mm-hmm. So we're all interacting with our version of the world. Right now, I'm interacting with my version of who I think you are, which is not really who you are. It's what I think of you and my impressions of you, which is my own projection. And everyone's doing that all the time.
So we're going to head towards a close here. Maybe a couple things. I'm curious to have you say a little bit more about this current time we're in with the eclipse. Just curious to get your thoughts on present moment, current astrology with these eclipses.
We're recording on April 4th, so the eclipse is in 4 days, and we're going to do an event here. I'm in the eclipse path myself right now. And the first thing to understand, it's not about the moment or the 3 or 4 minutes that the eclipse is going on in totality. It is the opening of an evolutionary marker again. And eclipses, in my view, are evolutionary passages until the next eclipses come along, which is generally 6 months. We generally have a pair of eclipses, a solar and lunar eclipse, every 6 months. Sometimes you have 3, but usually 2. So for the next 6 months, the eclipse passage that is opening in a few days really is occurring in the sign of Aries, and it is about taking full jurisdiction over our independence and sovereignty as being the director of our movie, so to speak, and the idea that we can regenerate into our power. All of us have been knocked down or wounded or bruised by the bump and grind of incarnation, and this eclipse is about regeneration. It's about launching into new endeavors and new things that are about who we're becoming. There's a resolution with Libra, where the South Node is, which is about conformity and socialization and what other people might want for us. And we're aligning with our own truth, our own power, our own sovereignty is what Aries is about. And individuation into the new iteration of self is what this one is about. And so it's also conjunct Chiron. The sun is very tightly conjunct Chiron for this eclipse, and that is about healing, again, through regeneration. All of us have been hobbled or weakened. What steps and measures can we take to enhance our well-being? Chiron. How do we transform woundedness into healing? How then can we operate with wisdom and compassion and mentorship and teachings to others based on our own healing and regeneration? Is the ripened fruits of that. And so we might be looking at weakness. We might be looking at limitation that we are being challenged to overcome through strength, through determination, through effort, through initiation, Aries, that I'm going to be the, director of my movie, the master of my destiny. And here's what the new iteration is about. Get out of my way. That's the spirit of Aries. And there's a lot of healing by simply going for it rather than collapsing in insecurity or social conformity or the expectations of others. That is some of the dance of this one for the next 6 months.
Beautiful. Yes, I'm ready for that.
So really, again, taking control of our lives. We don't need to be martyrs or victims. It's really up to us. It's not up to something external to us. And so how are we going to do that?
I love the word regeneration. I use it a lot, but I think it can be applied to anything, whether it's soil, the earth, or a life. We can rebirth ourselves. We can generate something. We can take what we've been given, this life curriculum, this body, the relationships we have now, whatever it is, and then we can generate something new with the ingredients we have. Kind of like I love to cook, and you could give me 20 ingredients and I could cook you with those 20 ingredients an Italian dish or a Thai food dish, or, it's like, so the ingredients are all there, but what we do with it, is really up to our co-creative power.
What are we going to cook up? I like that. That's a good way to phrase it for this one. And then there's also an emphasis on Pisces. Mars, which is the ruler of Aries, and the eclipse in Aries is in Pisces for the eclipse, conjunct Saturn, and also in Pisces. And that means that it's not easy. We got to take it upon ourselves to hammer vision Pisces into form, Saturn, through our own executive leadership action, Mars. This eclipse is saying, get off the can and stop contemplating your navel and get to organized, direct action now. It's not about, it's waiting, and it's about action. It's like, you want to change the world? Do it, is what this eclipse is saying. Do it with strength and determination and effort and follow through if you really want to grow, if you really want to share the ripened fruits, if you really want the world to realize our collective potential, it takes individuals, Aries, to act.
Okay, and so maybe we'll end on this because what I love about astrology, or at least the way that you talk about it, is that these are the ingredients on the table. Like, this is the opportunity we're being presented to co-create something. And if we actually say, yes, we accept the invitation and we get to work on whatever it is, whatever is being presented, it's not that it becomes easier per se, but it's like, again, if you're in a relationship and you want it to be a good, healthy relationship, it takes two people and to communicate, to take responsibility to actually do that work. And so right now, well, always, but we're focused right now on just this eclipse. So if we think about it that way, we're being presented with specific ingredients or a specific kind of invitation that if we said yes to it right now, we still have to work, but we have a partner. We have these elements, these phenomena partnering with us for these specific missions or initiatives or so I love that so much. All right. And you offer individual consultations. You have some books available, I know. Do you also teach your method of?
I have, but not recently. And I plan to do that again. I've enjoyed that in the past. I've been kind of drifting lately, to be honest, and I'm about to drift even more and go to Europe. And I've got big, new, spirited beginnings in my chart a little bit down the road. I'm still in a visionary stage, planning for that, and karmic reckoning, and like the world is. And things are going to shift in the mid to late 2020s in much more of a progressive, realized kind of potential renaissance time, but we're not quite there yet. So we are preparing, we are visioning, and this eclipse is, like we just said, is a step and a marker on the road to getting some more directed action towards where we're headed. But in my own astrology, I'm not quite there yet, and I'm going to get in touch with my roots is going on in my chart. So I'm going to Eastern Europe, where I haven't been, where my lineage is in Romania and Poland and Austria, and I'm going to go to concentration camps and explore my Jewish roots. And I got to do some integration with this before I do more offerings, but I will do that eventually again.
Wow. I'd love to hear how that goes. I'd love to have you back if you ever want to come back. And I'm going to plant the seed here. We'll include this in the podcast, but I'm starting a school called the School for Living Science. And as far as I can tell, like, I believe you are an astrologer scientist.
That's very Aquarian, yes.
And if it ever feels aligned for you, or you're ever interested, I may have a place for you inside the school teaching astrology as a living science. You're actually the first person I officially asked to even consider joining this initiative. I will be teaching in the school as well, but I want to have various divisions inside the school. And what you're doing is I just feel like it's so beautiful and needed, and it's a specific way of like, it's helped me so much. Kind of know what my curriculum is, and know what these phenomena are that I can partner with at various times. And so, for people listening who maybe have never taken the leap to actually, get an astrology reading would be the normal way of thinking about it. But with you, it's a consulting, it's some counseling, which I recommend. I want them to know it's not just a one and done. So I've had many readings with Eric. The first reading is always the natal chart reading, but then you can do combined readings with other people for a relationship, that's been so helpful. And then you come back and you do further readings because certain things are maybe up for you astrologically at various times of life. So it's kind of an ongoing thing. And I love the spiritual aspect of it. with counseling, with the science of astrology. So anyway, Eric, I really appreciate you. I appreciate your gifts. And I'll just plant that seed, and I have no attachment, you know?
Well, this is where I'm headed is teaching, mentoring, when I'm ready for it and when my chart's ready for it, and connecting with others who want to do the administrative stuff, because I'm not good at it. It's not my skill, and my interest is to organize and run things as an administrator, but I like doing the content and the essence of it. So I'm always looking for more organizational types who want to create the structure that I can just kind of come in and offer my content. So there is the potential for that, and we can have that dialogue more down the road.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you, that invitation, it's an open invitation to have that conversation with me. I'm going to be obviously like doing the podcast and on YouTube, like doing that Leo sun thing. And then we'll get help on the administrative back end, but we're building out the systems right now.
Yeah, I would be open to that and others places to teach. And eventually I do want to, with the help of administrators, you know, perhaps create my own type of school or program. Absolutely.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to share with people about astrology, about you? We're going to tell people obviously where to find you as well, but anything in closing?
Yeah, there's not much else. I really appreciate the invitation to come on. I love what you're doing. I support your broader vision, and I'm glad to be of support of that, you know, as we spoke about and our own consultations. And I love seeing you thrive and shine and inhabiting your potential. So good for you. And I've enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you have an open invitation to come back anytime if there are interesting astrological things happening. So where can people find you?
Well, my website is Soul Vision Consulting, and they can email me at eric@soulvisionconsulting.com.
We'll put the website in the description and show notes for people. Yeah. And I highly, highly, highly recommend, if you're listening to this and your interest is piqued, work with Eric. He's been amazing for me. So, and if you do, I'd love to just get a note like, hey, I did it. Elisha was awesome. I mean, no target. Hey, maybe he'll, yeah. So anyway, Eric, I just appreciate you. Everyone listening, I encourage you to consider working with Eric if astrology is up your alley and you resonated with everything we talked about today. And Eric, have a wonderful trip in Europe, and
thank you.
Hope to do it again.
Yes.